Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a potential financial earthquake.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, a new currency
Very
from the BRICS nations, and what it could mean for the U.S. dollar's, long reign at the top.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, isn't it? It goes beyond just like economics,
Yeah.
This is geopolitics, right?
Right.
We're talking about a whole block of countries.
Yeah.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then even more,
And growing.
Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE. Like they're all trying to reshape the whole global financial landscape.
Yeah, so to kind of guide us on this deep dive, our main source is this NASDAQ article. It's called "How Would a New BRICS Currency Affect the U.S. Dollar?" It's updated in 2024.
Okay.
And then we also have some background just on BRICS itself.
All right.
So first things first, why are they even considering this? It's
Yeah.
not like ditching the dollar is just a casual Tuesday afternoon decision, right?
No, absolutely not. This is a long time coming, right? There's a lot of fuel behind this fire,
Yeah.
Think about recent U.S. sanctions
Right.
on Russia and Iran, the trade tensions with China,
Yeah.
and, this desire among the BRICS nations for greater financial independence. They want to control their own economies, right?
Right. And it's kind of like them saying, hey, we're major players now. We need our own seat at the table.
Yeah,
We don't want to be at the mercy of the U.S. dollar anymore.
exactly. And they're not shy about this.
Right.
Like Lula da Silva, the Brazilian president, has actually called for a new system that moves away from a single currency's dominance. You know what I mean? And Putin, he's echoed that, right?
Yeah.
He's criticized the current system, saying it's vulnerable to manipulation.
So it's a pretty bold challenge, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
They see this system, this U.S. dollar system, which pretty much dominates like 90% of currency trading.
Right.
They see it as unequal. And so they're aiming for a more level playing field. But it's not all rosy,
Right.
There's some skepticism around this.
Well, let's unpack that skepticism a bit. Why are some experts, raising their eyebrows at this?
So one big concern is just the sheer diversity of the BRICS economies. I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. You
Yeah.
have giants like China and India
Right.
alongside developing economies like Ethiopia.
Right.
So how do you manage a single currency across this vast and varied economic landscape? That's a huge question.
It's like fitting square pegs into round holes.
Yeah, kind of. And then there's this elephant in the room, right? The
Mhm.
Chinese yuan.
Right.
China's economic weight is massive, right?
Right.
So some people are worried that a BRICS currency might just elevate the yuan,
Right.
Inadvertently,
Yeah.
creating a new kind of dependence.
Right. So is it a power play? Is it a legitimate response to this kind of, maybe skewed financial system? Or is
It's
it
probably a blend. It's got to be. I
Sure.
mean, there are legitimate concerns about how the U.S. dollar,
Right.
how vulnerable it is to manipulation, to U.S. monetary policy.
Right.
But at the same time, it's a power play, right? It's the BRICS nations flexing their muscles on the world stage.
It's an interesting push and pull, but let's get into some of the nitty gritty here. Like, what could the potential consequences be for the U.S. dollar?
Right.
Could this really dethrone the dollar
Yeah.
as this, global reserve currency?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The dollar's dominance is deeply ingrained,
Right.
but even the mightiest empires can fall.
Right. That is true historically speaking.
Yeah.
So paint a picture for me. Like, what happens if the dollar starts to lose its grip?
Okay, so imagine, right? The BRICS currency actually gains traction.
Okay.
It becomes a viable alternative for international trade,
Right.
for financing. Demand for the dollar, it could drop,
Okay.
leading to a decline in its value.
Right.
And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Imports become way more expensive. For you, for American consumers, that new phone, that gadget you've been eyeing,
Uh-huh.
suddenly it costs a lot more.
Ouch. Yeah, that hits close to home.
Ah,
I can already see the price tags going up.
right.
Are there any other potential consequences that we should be aware of?
Well, think about U.S. debt.
Okay.
A lot of it is held by foreign countries in
Yeah.
U.S. dollars. If the dollar loses value, those bonds become less attractive.
Right.
So it becomes harder, more expensive for the U.S. to finance its debt.
So it's not just about our shopping sprees.
Right.
This could impact how the U.S. government functions.
Exactly. And then there's the geopolitical aspect.
Okay.
The U.S. has a lot of influence globally, partly because of the dollar.
Right.
If other currencies, like this BRICS currency, start challenging that,
Yeah.
it could shift the balance of power.
So it really is like a financial Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Alliances are shifting, power dynamics, everything's in flux.
And remember, it's not just economic consequences. It's about the U.S.'s position on the world stage.
All right, so we talked about the potential impact on the U.S. dollar. But let's switch gears for a sec and talk about how this BRICS currency might actually work. Right?
Yeah.
We've heard some whispers about gold backing, which, I don't know, it sounds like a throwback.
It's an interesting proposition, for sure. President Putin has suggested backing it with gold, which could lend it stability,
Okay.
give it inherent value, especially in these times of global uncertainty.
So it's like a safety net
Yeah, kind of.
built into the currency.
Gold has always been seen as that safe haven asset, right?
Right.
So tying a currency to gold could inspire confidence, attract investors.
I can see the appeal, especially in a world that feels like, increasingly volatile these days.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be a return to the gold standard? Isn't that something that, like, most economists have dismissed as a relic of the past?
Not necessarily. There are experts out there like Jim Rickards. He's super knowledgeable about gold and finance, and he's suggesting that it might not be a traditional gold standard, where every unit of currency is directly redeemable for gold.
Right.
It could be more nuanced.
Okay.
It could leverage the stability of gold without going full on back to that old system.
So it's more about using gold as this anchor of stability
Exactly.
rather than, like, a rigid one-to-one backing.
Yeah, and don't forget, the BRICS nations, they hold a lot of the world's central bank gold reserves.
Right.
So they're well positioned to explore this option if they want to.
That's interesting. Now, before we get into the digital side of things, I want to just pause here for a second.
Okay.
And give our listeners something to ponder.
Okay, yeah.
We're talking about gold backing, a potential challenge to the dollar's dominance. It feels like the world's on the brink of a major financial shift.
Yeah. Here's something to chew on, right? Is this push for a gold-backed BRICS currency a sign of things to come? Like, are we seeing the early stages of a global move away from the dollar-centric system? And if so, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a lot to consider.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about this BRICS bridge.
Okay.
It sounds like something out of a, futuristic spy thriller.
It does.
But I'm guessing it has something to do with this whole digital currency landscape.
Yeah, you're spot on with the digital connection. The BRICS bridge is basically a blockchain-based payment system,
Okay.
and it's still being developed.
Oh, yeah.
But think of it like a, dedicated financial network that connects all the BRICS nations.
So like a SWIFT system, but
Exactly.
exclusively for BRICS.
Yeah, yeah. And what makes it even more interesting is this. It could potentially handle settlements in central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that term CBDCs thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
But I got to be honest, I'm still a little fuzzy on what that actually means.
Okay, so think of it like this. China is already experimenting with a digital yuan.
Okay.
So in some cities, people are actually using it for everyday transactions. That's a CBDC in action. Now imagine expanding that concept to a whole network of these CBDCs, all facilitated by the BRICS bridge.
Okay, so the BRICS bridge could be that platform for these CBDCs to flow seamlessly between those nations, potentially cutting out the U.S. dollar as the middleman.
Yeah, they wouldn't need to do those currency conversions. They wouldn't need to rely on the U.S. dollar for settlements. And that really ties back to what we were talking about earlier with de-dollarization.
Right.
The BRICS bridge could be a huge step in that direction.
It's like they're trying to create this whole new playing field. It's not just tweaking the existing system.
Right. Digital currencies, blockchain technology, things like this BRICS bridge, they're all pushing us towards a multipolar world.
Multipolar, what does that actually mean? Sorry, sometimes I need like a translator for econ jargon.
No worries. Basically, it just means a world where financial power isn't concentrated in the hands of like one or two currencies or one or two economies. A world where, blocks like BRICS have a much bigger say.
So a shift away from that U.S. dollar dominance.
Right.
To a system with multiple centers of influence.
Yeah, it's kind of like going from a solo act to a full orchestra.
I like that. I like that analogy. And this shift, it has implications for everyone. It's not just the BRICS nations.
Oh, absolutely. For our listeners, for their investments, for the global economy, right? In a world where digital currencies are becoming more common, you have Systems like the BRICS bridge emerging, what does that mean for all of us?
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap our heads around.
Yeah,
But it seems like something we really need to pay attention to.
absolutely. Awareness is key, right? To
Yeah.
navigate this crazy evolving landscape and to make smart decisions for the future.
For sure, for sure. Now let's maybe circle back to the impact on the US dollar for a sec.
Okay, yeah.
We've talked about it, but I think it's worth diving a bit deeper into some of the consequences.
Okay, yeah.
We talked about de-dollarization and like the downsides for the US economy.
Ah,
But what does that actually look like? What happens if the dollar weakens?
so remember, the US dollar, it's had this privileged status for decades.
Yeah.
It's been the world's reserve currency
Right.
for international trade, for oil transactions, everything. It's like the default currency for the global economy.
Yeah.
But that reliance on the dollar, it creates vulnerabilities for the US and for other countries that are tied to it.
So you're saying the thing that gives the dollar its power could also be its weakness.
Yeah. So what happens if the demand for the dollar decreases? That's the heart of de-dollarization.
Okay.
If a BRICS currency takes off and becomes a real alternative,
Yeah.
that demand for the dollar could plummet,
Okay.
and it could weaken the dollar's value.
All right.
Imports become more expensive, everything from electronics to clothing. That new phone, the price tag's going to jump.
Yeah, I'm already feeling the sticker shock. But it sounds like the implications go way beyond just what we buy.
Right. A weaker dollar could have ripple effects throughout the entire U.S. economy. Everything from U.S. debt to the cost of living. Don't forget, a big chunk of U.S. debt is held by foreign countries in U.S. dollars.
Right. So it's like the U.S. is borrowing money with a promise to pay it back in a currency that might be losing value.
Exactly. And if that dollar weakens,
Yeah.
those bonds, they become less attractive. It becomes harder and more expensive for the U.S. to finance its debt.
Okay, now it's starting to feel less like a theoretical discussion and more like a real potential economic headache.
Yeah.
What else should we be concerned about?
Well, think about the U.S.'s global standing. The U.S. has a huge advantage right now because everyone uses the dollar.
All right.
But if other currencies start challenging that, like a BRICS currency, it could shift the global balance of power.
Right.
What if the BRICS nations started using their currency for oil transactions?
Yeah.
That would be a major blow to the dollar.
It's like we're talking about a financial Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
Alliances shifting, power dynamics changing. It's a lot to think about.
It is. The global economy, the balance of power, they're constantly in flux. What seems certain today might be totally different tomorrow.
All right, so we've explored the motivations behind this BRICS currency, the pros, the cons, the impact on the U.S. dollar, the gold backing.
Right.
We've even touched on the whole digital side of things with the BRICS bridge and CBDCs. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've only scratched the surface of digital currencies and blockchain technology.
Okay.
So let's dig a little deeper into how the BRICS nations are positioning themselves in this, rapidly changing digital world.
Lead the way. I'm ready to explore.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from how this could shake things up for the U.S. dollar to
Yeah.
this whole intricate world of the BRICS bridge and CBDCs and all that.
It's a lot.
Yeah. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your take on what this means for the future, like for the whole global financial system.
What really stands out to me is that this is a genuine challenge to how things have always been done.
Yeah.
The BRICS nations, they have the economic clout, right?
Right.
And they're clearly willing to shake things up. They're forcing everyone to rethink what they thought they knew about global finance.
It's like a wake-up call, right?
Yeah. They're not content to just play by the old rules. They're writing a whole new playbook.
And it's not just some abstract thing, right?
No.
This could affect everyone's daily lives.
Absolutely. It's not a spectator sport. Whether you're an investor, a business owner, or just someone trying to make sense of the world, this is something you need to pay attention to.
Speaking of real-world impact, let's talk about the digital side again. We talked about the BRICS bridge, CBDCs, but what does that actually mean for people on the ground?
Imagine, right,
Yeah.
cross-border payments that happen like that instantaneously.
Okay.
Almost no fees.
Hmm.
Financial access for people who've been shut out of traditional banking. That's the promise of this whole digital revolution.
It sounds almost too good to be true. Is it really achievable?
The technology's there,
Yeah.
and the BRICS nations are all over it. They're not just talking, they're putting plans into action.
So are you saying we could actually see a digital BRICS currency?
They've been discussing it, a digital version of that new currency we've been talking about.
That would be a game changer.
It could further reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar. Think about it.
Yeah.
BRICS nations trading with each other, using their own digital currency, completely bypassing SWIFT, the dollar, all of that.
It's like a whole parallel financial universe.
And it could enhance financial inclusion within those countries, too. A lot of people in those nations don't have access to regular banking,
Right.
a digital currency right on their phone. That could be huge. It could empower those individuals, bring them into the formal economy.
So it's not just about economics and power plays.
Right.
It's about actual people.
Yeah, it's about access and opportunity,
But are there downsides? It seems like there's always, two sides to every coin.
of course. One thing that worries people is volatility. Digital currencies are known for their price swings.
Right.
That could create instability, especially in the beginning.
And that kind of undermines the whole stability thing they're going for.
Exactly. And then security.
Yeah.
Always a big concern with anything digital.
Yeah.
They'd need really strong safeguards to prevent hacking and fraud.
So cybersecurity is even more important in this digital world.
Huge. And then there's the question of regulation. How are these currencies going to be regulated? What legal frameworks will be in place? These are all things they need to figure out.
So creating a digital BRICS currency, it's complicated,
Yeah.
but it has the potential to really reshape things.
It does. It shows how ambitious the BRICS nations are. They're not just aiming for a new currency. They're trying to create a whole new way of doing international finance.
It's definitely a bold move. It's really fascinating to watch all of this play out. So even if a digital BRICS currency isn't a reality yet, individual nations are already making progress.
Yeah. And those individual efforts could pave the way for a more integrated digital system for the whole bloc. It's like building blocks, right?
Oh, yeah.
Each nation contributing to something much bigger.
It's hard to say what the future holds, but one thing's for sure. The BRICS nations aren't going to sit on the sidelines. They're making big moves, and the whole world is watching.
And they're not the only ones. Other countries are exploring digital currencies too. We're seeing this global shift towards a more digital, more decentralized financial system. It's a really exciting time to be following all of this.
We've talked about the motivations, the potential consequences, the digital landscape, the role of gold. It's been a real deep dive.
It has.
I want to thank you for, sharing your expertise and helping us navigate this complex topic.
My pleasure. This is the kind of stuff that keeps me thinking, keeps me up at night, Thinking about the future and how we deal with these challenges.
And to our listeners, we hope this has been informative and got you thinking. We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully it's given you some food for thought.
The future's unwritten, right? The choices that countries, businesses, and individuals make are going to shape the world we live in. So stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the BRICS currency and the future of the U.S. dollar. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Feel free to comment your thoughts or where you would like the conversation to go in a future cast. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.